Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sheila Zielinski Show for this Tuesday, February 27th, 2018. Happy birthday to me. And what better way to celebrate my birthday than joining two amazing guys? It is Carl Gallups from carlgallups.com, best-selling author and so many accolades, and Mike Zullo, Sheriff Joe Arpaio's lead investigator. And boy, you are not going to believe some of what they're going to lay out. And if you're thinking, hey, birth certificate, old issue, nothing to see here, you haven't heard this conversation yet, what even is going on recently? Well, you're going to be surprised, and I want to jump right into it. Without further ado, it is Carl Gallups, Mike Zullo. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. It is a pleasure.
Thank you so much
Sheila.
for having us today, Sheila.
Well, Carl, listen, I'm going to hand you the mic to start off with. Give us the backdrop, what we're talking about here today, and then throw it to Mike when you're ready. Gentlemen, take it away.
And to your audience, Sheila, I want them to know, and of course you know this, Mike Zullo and I have been immersed in this stuff for years. Mike is the investigator, the main investigator, first operating under the auspices of Sheriff Joe Arpaio and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. First as the lead investigator of the cold case posse, working directly for Sheriff Arpaio as his private, if you will, investigator, or personal investigator is the best way to say, on this particular case. But let me just do this. Let me start at what we would say the official end of it in 2016, December 2016. Let me start there so your audience will know right up front how serious this is. And then I want to back up and give a quick foundational historical understanding of this whole thing. And then we'll turn it over to Mike to fill you in on the latest details. But the bottom line is this. This investigation of this birth certificate thing, it culminated in its official stance under the auspices of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in December 2016, when Joe Arpaio was stepping down from the position of sheriff in January of that next year. Then the new sheriff was sworn in. But one of the last official things that Sheriff Arpaio did was to hold a one-hour press conference, he and Mike Zullo, on the where they were with the birth certificate investigation at that time. That was an astounding press conference, and a Fox News affiliate out in Phoenix actually carried it and covered it and filmed it. That video is still on the internet. It's on the internet. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, probably millions, because it's been embedded in many other places as well. But they can watch that whole one-hour press conference. It's amazing. It's super professional. It was attended by media and a large audience. But here's the thing. In that press conference, Sheila, it was revealed to the nation, and this is not all of the deep, dark stuff they have uncovered, but it was enough to present to the nation for all who cared to see it, that this case demands further investigation or further hearings from an official Congressional Investigative Committee, a congressional hearing, an FBI overview. This case is not a conspiracy theory. It's not a fake news case. This case was conducted by the fourth largest sheriff's office in the United States by a sheriff who was at the time a 50-plus year lawman, including 30-something years with the DEA, and then ran for sheriff of Maricopa County. He was elected 6 terms in a row, the only official law enforcement investigation into the matter of the birth certificate. And in that December 2016 press conference, Mike Zullo revealed, and I'll just break it down very quickly, he revealed this. The birth certificate that was posted on the White House website, the government website, purporting to be the proof that Barack Obama had a legitimate Hawaii birth certificate, was nothing more than a photocopy of a F file that was placed on the website. And by the way, you try to do something like that and go get a driver's license. You can't get a driver's license with a picture of a supposed birth certificate. But that's what they posted. But the problem is that in investigating that at the forensic level, not only was it absolutely discovered and proven to be an absolute forgery, a fabrication, a ground-up building of something that apparently never existed in the first place. Not only were they able to prove that, but it was also signed off on. The results of their finding was signed off on by 2 different international document examination entities, one in Italy, one out of Hawaii, believe it or not, and both of these entities are renowned in their fields. Both of them are certified to testify in courts around the world, and the one in Hawaii around the United States, including federal courts. They both are used to train law enforcement all over Europe in fake documents, digital documents. They do a lot of work in pornography, child pornography cases, etc. The one in Hawaii does a lot of work with document forgeries and how to detect them, etc. And so all of the information that Mike Zullo had compiled in this investigation was sent to these two people. It was a double-blind thing. In other words, neither one of these entities knew that the other one was doing this study. He sent it to them. The one in Hawaii, by the way, was an entity that also was known that the CEO of it was a big supporter of Barack Obama. And so Mike Zullo took a huge chance, I suppose you would say, because all Mike Zullo ever wanted, all Sheriff Arpaio ever wanted was the truth. But he took it to him and said, look, you're a supporter of Obama. Everybody knows it, but yet you're a professional. You've got this business. Please look over my shoulder. Tell me if I'm wrong. I want to know if I'm wrong. Mike Zullo told him, he said, I'm not out to nail anybody. I'm not out to bring down a president. I'm not out to prove something that's false. I want to know if I'm wrong. But right now, all the evidence we have points to this being a ground-up forgery. So he took the case, and he assured Mike Zullo. He said, oh, yes, Barack Obama is my president. And if I find out that this is junk, I will tell you. The bottom line, to get to the bottom line of the story, both of those entities returned sworn affidavits to Mike Zullo's investigation, which he is in possession of to this day, indicating that they agree that the information that Mike Zullo sent them proves forensically that document that Obama has used to identify himself, by the way, the only document the world has ever seen that is purported to be his official documentation of his identity and his birth in the United States, both of these entities said it's a fake. Not only is it a fake, but it's a forgery. Not only is it a forgery, but it's a ground-up fabrication. In fact, it was built on a blank template. Now, to make it even more shocking, Sheila, what we also know is that the building of that document was accomplished by the use of at least one real birth certificate out of Hawaii from a woman by the name of Johanna Ani. Now, it's a long story how Mike Zullo came in possession of it, but he actually possesses that document. This is not just something floating around out on the internet, but he actually possesses that document. And the document entity said that what happened was that a lot of the information that is on that Barack Obama birth certificate was actually lifted digitally, cut and paste and lifted and positioned on a blank template to form a document that supposedly was Barack Obama's. And they said at least hers was used, they know, and they've been able to prove it through forensics and mathematical calculations and juxtapositions, letters and angles and all of that it was just, in fact, whole groups of information was lifted from her document and digitally transferred over onto a blank template to create Barack Obama's false document. And these companies have agreed that that's absolutely the case. But they also said that there could have been other documents used as well, but for sure Johanna Ani's document was used. Well, as I said, Mike Zullo possesses that. So, we could go on and on and on with the evidence, but this is the birth certificate. So we know that this document is a fabrication. We know it's a forgery, and it's not just our opinion. It's not just Mike Zullo's opinion. This is a result of a 5-year forensic criminal investigation, which also included trips to Washington, trips to the National Archives, talking to CIA informant whistleblower, talking to people that used to be former DHS, people that invented software to do this kind of stuff and to breach government entities and health departments. And it gets really, really deep. So this is not some conspiracy theory. It's not just some pipe dream of a bunch of conservative conspiracy theorists sitting in a corner in somebody's basement trying to bring down a president. No. It is a legitimate law enforcement investigation involving everything that you would do to bring a murderer to trial, if you will. It's the same kind of investigation you would do with the same kind of evidence. So they presented that in 2016 at this press conference, videos showing how Johanna Ani's document was used, how the information was transferred over onto this blank template. It's an amazing thing to watch. When you see it with your own eyes, you just, oh my gosh, of course it's a forgery. Your eyes cannot deceive you in this. This is why, Sheila, your audience has never seen any of that on any kind of mainstream media. I mean, Fox News affiliate filmed it. It's on YouTube. But if people don't go to YouTube and watch that, they never saw it run on Fox News. They never saw it on CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC. They never saw it. Well, if, like Jimmy Kimmel was saying just a few days ago in his, parody of this whole thing, making fun of it, if it's all such a big laughing stock, if it's all so fake, then number one, why didn't they take the evidence of that press conference and show it to the world and show the world how fake it was and what a laughing stock it was? Number two, since these are tremendously powerful charges on the past president, that he governed this nation and commanded the U.S. military on a fake identification document. You know how many crimes are committed? There are 4 or 5 federal crimes committed to use fake ID, to gain an office and to put it on websites and to use it as your identification and to command the U.S. military with fake identification. I mean, oh my gosh, this is serious stuff. Yet, not a single federal law enforcement entity has disputed it. Not a single federal law enforcement entity or federal court has disputed it and has heard the case on its merits. Not a single congressional review has occurred on it. And worse than that, not a single congressional statement has refuted it or repudiated it. And not a single mainstream media has aired what your audience can see with their own eyes of that 1-hour press conference. This is astounding, Sheila. But knowing what we now know, what Mike Zullo has known for years and has been trying to warn the nation about the deep state and the fake news and the lying and the cover-up and the sophisticated spying equipment that has been invented in the last handful of years, that has been being used all across this land to blackmail people, to break into people's identity, to create fake documents. Have you ever heard of a fake dossier? I mean, this kind of stuff, now the whole world's talking about it, but they're conveniently not talking about the birth certificate, which is where all of this began. So that's kind of where we are. And what your audience needs to know is, some people may be saying, well, how did Sheriff Arpaio get involved in this in the first place? How did Mike Zullo get involved? Very interesting, quick story, and then I'm going to hush, and I'm going to let Mike Zullo just go from here. This is important. It was in 2010, I believe, when a man by the name of Donald Trump, who had not announced he was going to run for president at that time. He's a multi-billionaire builder, international construction engineer, a TV reality show host, and lived in Arizona, had a home in Arizona, knew Sheriff Arpaio and others, and was keeping track of the things going on about Barack Obama's birth certificate. He came out publicly and challenged Barack Obama to put a long-form official Hawaii birth certificate out there before the world and to end this controversy. He challenged him, and Barack Obama took the challenge. And that's where this document came from. And so in the meantime, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, some of his constituents, hundreds of them, signed a petition demanding that he investigate the possibility that this document that Obama did post was fake, because there were so many things that seemed to be wrong just by looking at it. And they said we could have been defrauded in the last presidential election, and Arizona has laws about that. I'm going to tell you, I know Sheriff Arpaio personally. Now, Mike Zullo knows him intimately personally. I know the man. I've heard him say many times. I've heard Mike Zullo tell you what I'm getting ready to tell your audience. Sheriff Arpaio did not want to investigate this. He did not think the document was fake. I mean, Sheila, back in 2010, 2011, none of us. I mean, I'm an ex-lawman, 10 to 11 years, 2 different sheriff's offices under 3 different sheriffs. In fact, Sheriff Arpaio even deputized me as a special deputy. So, I mean, I've been connected to law enforcement for a long time, but I didn't believe this. How could they, whoever that was, Congress, the government, the courts, allow somebody to be commander-in-chief that didn't have a proper birth certificate, that wasn't qualified constitutionally? That would never happen. The DNC wouldn't allow it. The RNC wouldn't allow it. Congress wouldn't allow it. So when people were raising all this cane with Sheriff Arpaio, he did not want to mess with it. But when finally presented with the petition, he told his constituents, okay, I'll investigate this. I will investigate. Well, Mike Zullo was on the cold case posse, very trusted by Sheriff Arpaio, tons of experience. He calls Mike Zullo in. He says, I want you to head this up. And this is what he told Mike Zullo. He said, I want to be the one who clears this president of these allegations. He said, I'm tired of hearing this to every Tea Party meeting I go to, every political rally. All people want to talk about is this man doesn't have a proper birth certificate. He said, I'm tired of hearing it. This thing has been posted. First glance, it looks official. Mike, investigate this and clear it. Mike says, yes, sir. Mike has said that when he was assigned this, Sheila, he said, Carl, this is a no-brainer. They're not going to let a man be the president and commander-in-chief who doesn't have a birth certificate. Mike was saying, we can figure this out in a couple of hours. We'll make a few phone calls. We'll examine the document. Well, anyway, after a few days of trying to do all of that and doing those things, Mike went back to the sheriff and he said, sit down, Sheriff. You're not going to like what I got to tell you. And that's when the first news conference was held, because what they discovered way back then was this document stunk to high heaven. It didn't pass the smell test. So they had a press conference, and the media that showed up, instead of saying, oh my gosh, look at this, they looked at Sheriff Arpaio and said, what authority do you have to do this? I mean, it was surreal. And that's when we all knew something was really stinking about this. And then they held a second press conference a few months later when they got even more information. It was ignored by the media. That's when they really knew. That's when the sheriff called Mike Zullo in and said, this thing stinks. You are my personal investigator on this. We're going to get to the bottom of it, which took Mike down a road that he's going to tell your audience about, that led him into deep state, deep, dark, nasty stuff, three-letter agencies, whistleblowers out of the CIA, trips to Washington. I mean, this thing gets nasty. But in the meantime, Mike was turning his evidence over to these document entity examination companies who, they got back with him. I mean, even one of them, a huge Obama supporter, and said, no, you're right. This is an absolute forgery. So anyway, I've taken a long time. I'm so sorry. But with that groundwork, any of your listeners that don't have a clue what we're talking about, now they at least know this is for real. This is not some emotional thing. This is not some conspiracy thing. It is a legitimate criminal forensic, completely legitimate law enforcement investigation. That's what this is. It is deadly serious. I am convinced. Sheriff Arpaio has said he is convinced. Mike Zullo says he is convinced, and Mike can speak for himself if he disagrees with me. All three of us are convinced that this birth certificate is foundational to everything we're seeing on TV now. Because look who's the president, the man that forced the birth certificate up there, Donald Trump. Look what they're doing to him. Well, Mike Zullo, I took a long time. I'm sorry, brother, but I just tried to lay the foundation.
Sheila, the one thing that I really want to stress to your audience, especially if they have never followed this before, is the foundational fact that propelled this investigation forward is that a PDF file is not a birth certificate. A PDF file has no legal authority. It can never, ever be considered a identifying document, a birth certificate, a vital statistics document. It cannot be used in any courtroom as proof of a birth event. It is absolutely nothing. And the public has never seen Barack Obama's official long-form birth certificate in going on, 9 years now? That document has never seen the light of day. And this is critical because you can look today and you could start to see we don't live in a factual news-based reality. We live in narrative journalism. The mainstream media, for lack of a better way to put it, 95% of those organizations, what they do is they float out a narrative and then they try to support that narrative with either inaccurate, semi-factual, or altered information. And that's what we came up against with this birth certificate. From the onset, when this began in 2011, like Carl had referenced, I wasn't a political person per se. I did my voting and that's what I did. I was not involved in politics, and I'm not involved in politics now. When I got this document and began to look at it and started to do a little research, one of the foundational principles that I just alluded to was, hey, this is a PDF file. I can't take a PDF file of my driver's license and go get Social Security benefits. So right from the onset, this was relatively easy. This is not a birth certificate. They have to go produce the real certificate. Going a little deeper into this, it became extremely apparent that there were problems now. This was more than just a scan of a hard copy document. There were links and layers attached to this that didn't make any sense. There were links and layers in the document that showed very vital information had been brought into this document on its own, separate from anything else on its own separate link, and it appeared to have been planted onto the document. So right off the jump, we know, look, it's not an official document, it's not a long-form birth certificate, and it's plagued with these problems. So we did a very speedily put together press conference to alert the public, this is where we are right now. The whole incentive to doing those first two press conferences was to get congressional attention that this thing needs to be looked at. It needs to be looked into. Either produce the real document or tell us why you're not. That led to subsequent trips. I think 3 or 4 trips I took to Washington, D.C. I met with 6 or 7 either senators or congressmen, and nobody would help us. As a matter of fact, Carl and I, we are literally sitting in the rotunda at the Capitol. We're sitting in the rotunda. I'm watching Nancy Pelosi strut by. We're sitting at a table with Jeff Miller was his name. I am laying this out for him. He looks at this and he's realizing there's some issues here. He sets up with us to get back with him, make arrangements to come to Florida to his home office, bring all my information, and we're going to move forward with this. Carl and I leave. Carl goes through a series of email exchanges with him. I'm making plane reservations, hotel reservations, rental car reservations. We are set to go. And then lo and behold, his chief of staff contacts Carl. To our amazement, tries to impress upon us as if this meeting never happened and that they never agreed to it. Meanwhile, Carl has the email exchanges directly with him and his assistant putting all this together. So, I mean, that's a fallacy right then and there. So this prompted some more work on our behalf, because when you have something like this happen, this starts to raise alarm bells. Somebody told this guy this meeting is never going to happen. Going back and forth to Washington, D.C., the only person that told me the truth about taking this to any kind of level of investigation on a congressional basis was Michelle Bachmann. After I sat down with her, she told me straight up that, look, she said to me, she goes, Mike, we know there's problems with this. She says, but John Boehner will never allow this to come to the floor. It's just never going to happen. So after that meeting, here we are. We have this situation. We have a document that's a problem. And at that point, we were faced with a little bit of a dilemma. What do we do? Throw this in the garbage and pretend it didn't happen? Where do we take this? Well, we couldn't take it to the FBI because they're run by the DOJ, and the DOJ at that time was Eric Holder was running the DOJ. Obviously, we had no place we could turn with this. The FBI had been contacted on numerous times by individuals in the public domain asking for them to look into this, and they refused to even take the phone calls. And we knew that if we take this to the FBI, they're just going to take our information and they're not going to do anything with it. So here the sheriff and I are looking at this situation, and I had said to the sheriff, I go, you know, Sheriff, there's another way at this. There's something else with this document, and if you really want to get to the bottom of it, I think I can get there. And his exact words to me, he goes, Mike, that's what we do. If you think you have another way to prove this thing is fraudulent, then I want you to do it. And that's what I embarked on. After 3 years, I was lucky enough to get in touch with 2 different document examination companies, forensic companies. One of them was based in Italy, because I tried to get a digital forensic company to help us here in the United States. And after about 200 tries, people came right out and told us, we're not going to go anywhere near this. Other entities told us, look, we know there's problems with it, but it's too hot for us to handle. We're not going to go anywhere with it. So I decided I need to go outside of the United States. I need someone that isn't afraid to take a look at this document. So I was fortunate enough to secure 4 labs. 4 labs in Italy is a digital forensics corporation. Their specialty is child pornography cases. They testify as court-recognized experts. They train law enforcement in forensics involving computer, digital creations, and forgeries and things of that nature. So in contacting them, I also had previously contacted Reed Hayes. Reed Hayes was a document examiner in the state of Hawaii, as Carl has alluded to. He was an Obama supporter. He is an Obama supporter. He had no inclination to even take this on, but because he's a professional, he agreed to do so. I had both these entities working on the same information, the same evidence that I had produced for them, completely unaware that each of them were doing the same thing. Now, keep in mind, these are different forensic disciplines. One of them is digital forensics. The other one is old-fashioned document examination, looking for pen strokes and typewriter impressions and things of that nature. Both of these entities, again, not knowing each other were involved, came to the exact same conclusion, that the document is inauthentic, the document lacks integrity, and the document is unreliable. And as a matter of fact, Reed Hayes, the Obama supporter, called it an outright fraud. And I have his reports that tell us this. And I'm just going to read one excerpt from Reed Hayes' conclusion, that he could not conclude anything else but determine that it's a fraud. And here's what he says. The evidence noted herein is clear and convincing proof that the Obama Certificate of Live Birth, posted on the White House website on April 27, 2011, is a fraudulently manufactured document. Evidence indicates that the Certificate of Live Birth of Johanna Ani is one source utilized in the construction of the Certificate of Live Birth. The nail in the coffin, and that's in quotes, that proves the COLB, that's the Obama certificate, is inauthentic, is the exact lineup of numerous entries on both the COLB and the Ani certificate. And what that means is we have groups of words, Honolulu, Hawaii, Oahu. We have date stamps on the lower left and right corners of the Obama certificate that literally were picked up and placed on the Obama PDF certificate that were taken from the Ani, an official, a real Hawaii birth certificate, paper document. What that means is this was a form of cut and paste lift. It is impossible to have word alignment as precise as what's on the Obama and the Ani certificate as they relate to each other. They are on different spacings on the Obama document. In other words, the words themselves do not line up in tandem with each other as far as placement. In other words, one may be a little more left on the Ani document versus right on the Obama document as far as their placement. But the words themselves line up perfectly. I know that's going to be hard for your audience to understand, but if you view the press conference, you're going to see it right away. It's an absolute impossibility. In addition to that, there are two date stamps on the Obama certificate. Their lower left is a box 20, lower right is a box 22. Both of those are dated August 21st, 1961. Those are hand-placed stamps. Those are done with what's called a Bates stamper. And don't forget, this was done or supposedly created back in 1961. There were no computers doing this. You had to do it all by hand or typewriter. And you take that Bates stamp and you would stamp the date that the local registrar accepted the document, and then you would stamp it again, the date that it was accepted by the state itself. Both of those stamps have unique angles to them. Both of those stamps appear on the same corresponding box to the same corresponding date stamp year as the Obama. In other words, the Ani certificate has the same August 1961, and the Obama has the same August 1961, same hand-placed angle on each corresponding stamp. In other words, that's an impossibility. You cannot have someone able to replicate the exact angle of a hand-placed stamp on any document. And Reed Hayes, who is an educator in his field, came to that conclusion. He actually teaches his students that if you have hand-placed artifacts on a document, they could never match exactly. They could not even be close, because it's impossible for a human being to replicate something in that fashion. So we demonstrated that in the press conference. We also demonstrated the fact that there are boxes on the document that contain a typewritten X. In other words, marking off the box. Reed Hayes discovered on the document that there is an exact matching X contained on the Obama certificate that matches exactly the same to one X on the Ani certificate. And what he also concluded is that same X was brought over from the Ani certificate to the Obama certificate, placed in the same corresponding box, and then that X was used again on the Obama certificate placed in a different box. So understand, we have an exact X, type stricken X, taken from the Ani certificate and used twice on the Obama. So understanding that, and when you put this together in totality, the digital forensics experts in Italy concluded the same findings, that the relational position of the words Honolulu, Oahu, and Oahu are completely improbable, that the X's are duplicates, and that the angles are the same on both documents for those date stamps that I had just previously described to you. They concluded, and only based on a limited sampling of documents that we had to give them, that this document is 1,000 times more probable to be felonious or fictitious or fraudulent. 1,000 more times. They also estimate and realize 4 labs, these are PhDs, these are doctors in this field. They also concluded, had they had a greater sample, they believe that 1,000 time number would be even higher. Reed Hayes is a document examiner, old school document examiner. These people do digital forensics, and they had also determined that the analysis of the document, including what's called metadata. Metadata is something when a document is created, it is like the history of the building of the document. That metadata has been erased from the Obama PDF file. They also concluded that they went to the whitehouse.gov site and pulled down Barack Obama's tax returns, which were put through the same copy process as the certificate, except that metadata is completely intact. So what they're saying here is this is an element of concealment. We have no way to look at the metadata to make any determination if anything was moved, realigned, brought over. It's all gone. So that in and of itself destroys the integrity of the document. Once you destroy the integrity, you can no longer rely on the document. It's very difficult for your audience to comprehend this. Viewing the press conference, and Carl, if you could provide a link for that, once they see this, trust me, they are going to get it.
Well, I just want to throw a couple things in here and just know this. I've got the greatest audience in the world. They're awake to all this, and we know it's a fake. But here's the thing. I can't get past the irony of the fact that the very guy who pressed this to be shown to the world only to have it be discovered as a fraud turns around and pardons the very guy who investigates this, pardons him from bogus contempt charges. You can't even make that up, let alone you've got a president does a chop job on his birth certificate, the only document that would prove that he was actually eligible sitting at the helm for 8 years with his long train of abuses. But that's the least of the fake fraudulent stuff that he's done. Now with all this stuff coming out about the spying and the wiretapping and the fake dossiers, the phony FISA warrants. But Mike, what are the ramifications for this?
Well, I mean, the ramifications are kind of uncharted. You're talking about what I believe here is the foundational lie to the presidency of the United States.
Yes.
My conclusion to a memo that I wrote to Sheriff Arpaio back in 2016 was that what this was a narrative that had been floated out there, a narrative that is unsupported, and a manufacturing of what's called direct evidence. In other words, tangible. Even though you can't touch the PDF itself was manufactured, so it's direct evidence to support a phony narrative. Now, if you're supporting a phony narrative, there's only a handful of reasons why. It's either number one, you were not born in the state of Hawaii, or number two, you're concealing some other factor that would either be an embarrassment or would have the potential to damage your chances. So this document was created for nothing more than political gain and to quell what, quote, the media has called a conspiracy theory that they were being pressed on greater and greater. And you have to realize something else. Think about this. The President of the United States himself, when he announced this to the world, that this was his birth certificate, he didn't hold up a paper document. He didn't hold it up in his hand and say, this is mine. He didn't do anything like that. He referred to something that was put out on the internet. And there was a press gaggle about an hour before he came out. And a reporter had asked him, is he going to hold the document? And they said, no, and it won't be here for him to do so. Well, why would that be? It's called plausible deniability. They had sent his private attorney, Judith Corley, from Perkins Coie, on an overnight trip to Hawaii to pick up these, quote, long form birth certificates, 2 copies of them. Purportedly, she comes back that evening with the documents, and they never see the light of day. As a matter of fact, in the press gaggle, there's transcript of it where a reporter is pushing and asking, are you going to show us the document? And they try to say, we showed it to you. And the reporter says, no, you showed us a photocopy. And that argument is dropped right there. There are no photographs of that hard paper document at that press gaggle, even though there are photographs of the reporters sitting with the PDF printed out on hard copy paper, white paper, sitting with it in their hands. So it has never seen the light of day. And that has to be disconcerting, because if you have a $10 birth certificate and you can't even hold it up and declare it's mine, there has to be another reason why you're not doing that.
Right. But I mean, what's going to happen now going forward? All these years later, the sitting president was a complete sham. All the years of work that you guys put into the years of this investigation, and the guy walks for perpetrating the biggest scam on the American people in a long train of scams. But now what, Carl and Mike? It's just, oh, well, sucks to be you? I mean, that's not only criminal, that's crazy.
Well, can I jump in here, Mike?
Please.
Okay, Sheila, listen, your question is excellent. Everybody's asking that. The answers are only speculative. I'm not speaking for Sheriff Arpaio. I do have a lot of inside scoop, but on this particular answer, let me speculate. This is Carl Gallup's. I believe my speculation is rather learned because I have been deeply involved in this and know almost everything Mike knows, and only because he shared it with me. He's the investigator, but there are a lot of things he hasn't even shared with me just to protect me and to protect the integrity of the whole investigation. But the bottom line is this. You asked a very good question. My speculation is this. I'm just going to go ahead and say, I think there's a spiritual element to this too.
Yeah.
You know, what are the statistical human chances of a man who's not a politician? He's a TV star and a builder, never has even served as dog catcher in a small city. What are the chances that he would walk through a field of 17 Republican candidates in the primary, some of them belonging to what we now know as the deep state? Yeah. He walked through the entire Bush machine. He walked through the entire Clinton machine. He walked through the entire Obama machine. He walked through the entire deep state machine. Then he walked through the entire DNC machine and the DNC deep state to become the president. And it just happens to be the same guy who said something about the birth certificate and got Obama and his people to begin this whole charade in the first place, which now we know implicates the entire mainstream media. And I'm going to say this, as good as Fox News is in a bunch of stuff, they're complicit in this too, in that they will not report what Mike Zullo is talking about today. They will not report it. They won't show the video showing people how this thing was done. They won't replay the press conference. Even Fox News. None of the others will. So the media is complicit in this. Some of them, I think, were in on it. I truly do. But others are just embarrassed by the fact that they let the biggest story in the history of the United States, the biggest fraud in the history of the United States, make fools out of them because they believed the narrative that it was nothing more than a conspiracy theory. But now that this last press conference was given and the evidence is right before your eyes, they won't even refer to it, Sheila. They won't even refer to it. Yeah. And it's unbelievable. So the press is complicit. Listen to this, Sheila. And so is Congress. Because Mike and I have heard congressmen tell us to our face, we know there's something here. Our colleagues know there's something here. But we've got campaigns to run. We can't be associated with this. They were more concerned with their own political expediency than they were with the sovereignty of the United States of America and the United States Armed Services. I mean, that's treasonous.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Carl, and you mentioned congressmen, and wouldn't this be beautiful? Well, and we got to pray for this because as Joe Arpaio is entering the Arizona state race, what redemption that would be. And I mean, please tell me, Mike, I know you can't speak from, but please at least give me a shred of hope that he is saying, you know what, I'm not done with this birth certificate yet.
Oh, I could tell you could take that to the bank. I mean,
yes.
Even up until 2 days ago, calls me to speak to me about this issue, directly. This is not something that he is going to let go of. I mean, if there is any hope about this being resurrected through the Senate, it's going to be with Joe Arpaio. Yeah. I think that's a given. I mean, look, Joe Arpaio would not have staked his 52-year law enforcement reputation on this if he didn't believe that he has something here that's viable. He just wouldn't have done it. Look, it would have been easier on both Sheriff Arpaio and me if I could have come out and cleared the document and said, he's good to go. My life would have been easier. Yeah. But that just couldn't happen because it isn't. What transpired here, Sheriff Arpaio, we know he was pardoned by the president, but there's a big backstory to all of that. And during the course of this investigation, we were contacted by an individual who put us in touch with a subcontractor for the CIA. And he disclosed to us that during his time there was secret programs going on in the federal government. Now, this is before you people ever heard of it. Secret programs going on in the federal government where they were spying on Americans. And he produced the identities of 151,000 residents of Maricopa County, which Sheriff Joe was the sheriff of Maricopa County. 151,000 residents, their personal information. I'm talking name, address, birth date, social security number, bank account information. And he presented that to us. And he told us that he retrieved this while he was in the employ working under John Brennan, Clapper, Comey, the whole cast of characters. As a matter of fact, it is courtroom documented on an unrelated federal proceeding where he was the individual who built the computer system and the hacking software that penetrates computer systems around the globe for the NSA. Now, that's called the Hammer, located in Fort Washington, Maryland. He built that system. He was hacking computers around the globe because of the war on terror, is what it originally was created for. But then it went awry. As a result of being in contact with him, that put me in contact with a few other individuals who are well documented and noted governmental employees of the NSA that created the harvesting software. And that was at the time called Thin Thread. And what that would do, using the Hammer's computer system to breach, would allow you to penetrate a computer system and download anything you wanted undetected. It also would allow the gathering of mass information through the fiber optic networks that carry all digital data, emails, phone calls, bank transactions. Whatever you thought you could do over a computer electronically, they could grab it. Thin Thread had Fourth Amendment protections built into it. They were okay with doing this as long as this information was encrypted, and then you would have to go to a FISA court if you were the government, and if you wanted to see who was talking to who, you had to specify under oath why you reached this conclusion and why this was a necessity, and they would only unencrypt that targeted individual. Well, the government wasn't satisfied with that. They took it and created a program called Trailblazer. Trailblazer did nothing more than do away with the Fourth Amendment protections, and they grabbed everything. And if you go back in time, you'll remember when this was coming up with AT&T and these cell phone companies, they were saying, well, the government is just collecting metadata, because metadata has really no meaning to the general public. Well, that was not true, because the information in our possession was not metadata. It was printed out line by line, name, phone number, time of call, who they called to. I had banking information from people. I had all kinds of things. I had the private information of Supreme Court justices, every senator, federal judges. This was insane what this individual had. 600 million records were collected in the time span he worked there. So we had this information, but the way this went down with the birth certificate, we knew we had a problem with this, that we couldn't go to the FBI with this for two reasons. Number one, when this individual left his employ with the CIA, the FBI falsified affidavits and raided his house under false pretenses. It was later determined in court that they fabricated the affidavits for the warrant, and they had to return everything they took from his residence. So he wanted nothing to do with the FBI. We couldn't go to the DOJ because the DOJ is running around with those three-letter agencies and now what you identify as the deep state. So what we ended up doing is we took him to a federal judge. And in some of the information that he had illegal wiretaps where he demonstrated that Sheriff Arpaio and the sheriff's office were in fact illegally wiretapped by the federal government. That and about 41 other individuals. Well, we took that to this federal judge, and this federal judge was the head of the FISA court back when bin Laden was running around and is actually the judge that authorized the wiretaps on bin Laden 3 o'clock in the morning in his living room. He told us the story. He looked at that document, which had all these wiretap, they have special code numbers next to them. And he looked right at that, and I will never forget this. You know, he's a judge, they're poker-faced. And he's looking at this, and he takes that document, he lays it down, he puts his hand on it, and he just looks up at me and he goes, "There is no FISA court in the nation that would authorize this. Sheriff Arpaio is not a terrorist." That's all I had to hear. That meant he saw something on there that he recognized. As this is transpiring now, I end up putting this individual together with Larry Klayman, because this guy needed an attorney at this point. Larry Klayman was successful in getting him to the FBI, convinced him that he had to work with the FBI and DOJ. He goes in twice under what's called production immunity and testimonial immunity, and he brings 600 million records with them. He was already known to them, obviously. They looked at him and they said, "You give us something that we can verify, or we're not talking to you about anything." Well, according to him, he laid out for them the wiretap information. And in about 3 weeks, the FBI got back to him and gave him what was called testimonial immunity, and they spoke to him for, I think it was either 4 or 6 hours. And he laid out a litany of things. Now, you have to realize this individual was telling us things that were going on that now the public is only learning of. And as I sit here today, I hear things that are making the headlines, and this had been going on for almost a decade prior. So he's got some credibility in my book. So there is a whole deep state element that ensued with this. Now, the birth certificate was one issue. And if you go back, I said earlier, we live in a narrative news environment. Now this is a problem. Arpaio's the guy with the birth certificate. Now, they were very successful in shutting down and blacking out the birth certificate. But this other CIA stuff was making its way out, and that was going to become a problem. So what transpired was, when Sheriff Arpaio was in a civil trial over purported violations of civil rights of illegal aliens, this was a private trial. Now, it was heard in federal court, but people make a mistake. They hear it's federal court and they automatically assume it was the government. It wasn't. It was the ACLU bringing a lawsuit against Arpaio because we stopped a couple guys that we didn't know who they were and we detained them. So that was the cover to bring the lawsuit. This is a civil trial. A leak from Arpaio's office alerts this judge that we have the CIA information. Next thing I know, I'm getting federal subpoenas for all my information regarding what was dubbed the Seattle case, because this individual lived in Seattle. My information, recorded conversations I had, are starting to find their way onto the airwaves. And in open civil court, this judge fillets our investigation. Literally wants to take this investigation and just open it up and shut it down. And that's exactly what happened. Now, as this was transpiring, at the same time, Arpaio is up for re-election as sheriff, and the DOJ takes the unprecedented move to want to charge him for criminal contempt because, in the judge's opinion, he violated a convoluted order that this judge gave. That even an appeals court said they don't understand the order. But in this judge's opinion, he violated it. This is 2 weeks before early voting started in Arizona. This is unprecedented, and it goes never, set up by Eric Holder, never to open an investigation on anybody running for office close to an election. But they did it to Arpaio. They did everything they could to destroy Arpaio, kill the Seattle investigation, kill the birth certificate. They went out of their way to do this. So this has a lot of components in it. And this individual that I'm speaking about also alerted me back in 2013, I believe it was, that he had information that was retrieved from the very same computer system that he built, that there were breaches in the Department of Health of Hawaii's vital statistic record from November of 2008 all the way up to January 13th of 2011. That's about 3 or 4 months before the birth certificate PDF file ever emerged. 9 breaches by this computer owned by the federal government. He says the IP address trail shows information was retrieved from the state of Hawaii vital statistics records and archives databases, sent to a server operated in Jakarta, Indonesia, which he identifies as a CIA-owned and operated server, and then sent back to Fort Washington. And what happened to it after that, we have no idea. Now, You have to look at this as an investigator and go, why would the government care about vital statistics records in Hawaii? What would they even matter? And why are those dates coincide from 2008 to 2011? This is the big problem. Larry Klayman, almost 3 years ago now, brought that individual to the FBI. James Baker, Jim Comey, laid that information out for the FBI. 3 years have gone by. The FBI has done zero with it. Zero. As a matter of fact, Larry Klayman filed another lawsuit because they're telling Klayman they don't even know where the information is. Come on. So this is this whole deep state thing. And now you're seeing the cover-ups with the dossier. And bear this in mind. You have people that have fabricated information to derail an election, go after a sitting president, open up a tainted investigation from any legal standard for a crime that doesn't really exist because there is no crime of collusion. There's no statute for collusion. And they are that brazen to do that. Do you think these people wouldn't make a phony PDF to fulfill a narrative to show the public who's so gullible? Oh yeah, here's proof that he was born there. Take our PDF and just believe what we tell you. You bet they would. And that's the times we're living in. And then you have CNN and MSNBC all holding water on this birth certificate. And let me tell you one other thing. When we were doing the very first press conference, this was back in 2012, Chris Matthews' program contacted us. They wanted to interview me right after the birth certificate's press conference was over. Fox News wanted to interview me, Sean Hannity, right after it was over. When I delivered the press conference and said there are problems with this document, crickets. There was no interviews anymore. Within 24 hours, mainstream media went black. This was never going to be discussed again. And I'm sure that there's a big concern of what a constitutional crisis this would, create. Well, you know what? So be it. The one thing that has to happen is something like this could never, ever happen again. The public can never be frauded. This is the biggest mass fraud in American history, and nobody wants to look at it.
Yeah, it's just stunning. And yet it's interesting that the very person that brought it up, again, when Donald J. Trump, he's now in the position to do something about it. He made an official statement. Hey, you know what? Okay, he was born here. Good enough for me. You have to wonder if he's got a plan. He's certainly got enough on his plate. But hey, he's the one that originated. Do you think that he's going to act on this?
I can tell you that Steve Bannon, who was one of his advisors, hates this birth certificate issue. I don't think they wanted this issue to become an issue in his campaign. And if you notice what the president said, he just conceded, okay, he was born here. He never talked about the certificate. Yeah. And I can tell you from sources that I have that this has never left his memory banks. I can tell you that in all confidence.
Yeah. And let me say, Sheila, and this is where I was going a little while ago, and then we took a turn, and we needed to take the turn. But I'm just saying, think about it. So the question you just asked is the $1 million question. Millions and millions and millions of people are asking it. It's a good question. But the answer is everything we've just said plus this. So now Donald Trump's the president. He can pull the trigger on this. He now has the power of the entire executive authority to bring this to light. But what Mike Zullo and I believe is that it probably will eventually come to light. I mean, and for a lot of reasons, and I'm not going to go into them right now, but here's the reason why it probably hasn't thus far. Deep state. Donald Trump, for the entire first year of his presidency, other than trying to accomplish the business of being president, has been fighting every moment of every day with deep state investigations, Robert Mueller, the Russians, and all of this smokescreen stuff with fake dossiers, created documents. I mean, it's the same stuff that this birth certificate's made out of. But watch, you have a complicit Congress by and large. You've got a complicit media completely. You've got complicit courts. I mean, Donald Trump, he's a brilliant man, and I'm giving him credit for probably he's cleaning house, he's draining swamp, he's flushing the toilet, and there will come a time when it will be perfectly right for him to pull this trigger. But if he pulls the trigger now, I mean, look at the DOJ. Look how infiltrated that is. Look at the FBI. He had to fire Comey, and look what's still there. It's infested. These would be the entities that he would have to use to bring the largest crime ever committed against America to the forefront. But right now, as we're speaking, He can't. It's infested with deep state. It would probably never see the light of day. So you got to know that the man that God used to bring this whole thing to the forefront, who's now the president, this has to be in his mind.
Well, every time the guy turns around, there's something else. They're too busy trying to take our guns or deflect us with smoke and mirrors to try to get us off, just investigating some of these deep state swamp creatures. And Mike, our prayers are with you, sir. The stuff that you've gone through and the stuff Sheriff Joe's gone through, I mean, man, we pray for you. And boy, oh boy, we got to continue to keep you guys in our prayers, and we will. Carl, Mike, thank you for everything you have done to shed the light on this. It's incredible, the opposition that you've got. And I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to come on this show today. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sheila. We're so honored. God bless you. And I'm going to say what Mike Zullo is too humble to say. He would never say it, but I'm going to say it for him. Mike literally has put his life on the line. It's still on the line. He has immersed himself in this 5-6 years now of deep criminal investigation, enduring all of the trashing and the lying and the obfuscating and the attacks upon him, his family, and threats, and everything that goes with that. Mike Zullo is a mirror reflection of the same kinds of things that our very founding fathers did. Young men, 30, 40, 50-year-old men who laid everything on the line to bring this nation to its birth. Mike Zullo is laying everything on the line to keep this nation a lawful constitutional republic and to keep it from being subverted by perhaps foreign powers and foreign enemies. You would think that the media would come along beside of him, and that the DOJ and the FBI and the CIA and Congress and the courts, you would think they would come along beside of him. So far, they have not. That's the same kind of stuff our founding fathers got in the early days. So I think the Lord has his hand on this man. I think the Lord has his hand and is using Donald Trump. And I think very soon that something's going to break on this soon. Mike Zullo has literally made a huge sacrifice and is still making that, and yet his resolve to do the right thing. And I'm just going to add this. All Mike Zullo wants, all Sheriff Arpaio wants, all I want is for somebody to properly vet and to hear this case on its merits as it has been investigated by these law enforcement professionals. If we are wrong, prove we are wrong, and we will walk away. But if we're not, then there is something desperate that needs to be done to protect our nation. It's as simple as that. And I pray that your listeners will understand that and will pray for him in that regard.
Well, thank you, Carl. And I'm sitting here turning red. You know how much I hate that.
I know. I wish you weren't even on the air while I was saying it, but I know how you feel. Mike would never say it, but it's the truth.
Yeah, well said, Carl. Mike, Carl, thank you so much, gentlemen, for everything that you do. And thank you so much for your time in coming on the program today. God bless you both.
Thank you, Sheila. God bless you.
Folks, that was Carl Gallups, carlgallups.com. And of course, Joe Arpaio's lead investigator, Mike Zullo, cold case posse commander. In the description today, I've also linked a copy of that press conference. It is there in the description. Do check that out. Hey, listen, if you are not one of my patrons, please do jump on over there to Sheila.media. Just click on the Patreon banner and become one of my patrons for any amount. I look forward to your continued support as I bring you quality programming that you will not hear on the mainstream. News and headlines under a biblical worldview and solutions for living in these end times. You really can't get much better than that. Thanks for tuning into the program tonight, and do check out the rest of the week's lineup. It is fantastic. We'll see you real soon. Good night, and God bless.